October. Now, with the dearth of news of any importance really today, I thought I would discuss a recent poll which was taken of the people of Scotland, or a representative number of them, about how they intend to vote in the 2026 Holyrood elections. Now, the result of this poll surprised me, because one of the things that it showed was about 58% of the Scots who responded said that they were planning to vote SNP first and second votes. Now, this shocked me. It shocked a lot of people, because for the second time, or maybe even the third time, the voters of Scotland have misunderstood the entire British voting system that's been forced onto Holyrood. The voting system is fairly simple in the first vote. It's first past the post. Whichever candidate gets the largest number of votes in a particular constituency wins the seat. We all understand that. And so in the past, the SNP has won a lot of seats by doing their first vote as for the SNP, which you would expect. But when you vote for the same party again, in the second vote, especially when you have won a massive number of seats in the first vote, the number of votes which are actually counted in that second vote is hugely reduced by discounting the number of votes that were cast for the seats that you've already won. And that gifts the second vote seat to another party. And the only other parties really with enough voter numbers to actually win those seats will usually be pro-union parties registered in England. And that means that the SNP, by going for this vote 1 and 2 policy, which they have kept to for years, is ensuring that devolution stays where it is. The SNP sometimes would end up as a minority government, but in opposition we would see the combined might of the 3 UK parties, which is precisely what the voting system was designed to ensure. That no way could a pro-independence majority be ever achieved, because voters are too stupid, according to the British state, to realise that the second vote choice is actually more important than the first. Now, the reason I mention this is because Scots voters have consistently misunderstood this voting system ever since it was introduced. We do not take the time to look at how our second vote would affect who gets elected in that second seat. Remember, the list seats are apportioned based on a number of votes for the smaller parties, with the larger party, which is one of the most seats, having most of its votes already removed, which means it's very unlikely, or it's impossible, for it to win that second seat. So voting for the SNP or any other party in the second vote, if you vote 1 and 2, is unlikely to result in success unless you're a much smaller party. But that's not the case. The question is, how do we change people's minds about how to vote? Because, as you know, one of the biggest problems in the Scottish independence movement generally is the fact that people are riven with, or parties are riven with, arguments between one party and another. One party's leader did X, or this party leader said that. I was offended. I don't like this person. I'm not going to vote for their party. And so people see this in terms of a personal choice about the leader of that particular party, or how that party came about. We're not prepared, strangely, to put aside that kind of difference in pursuit of the larger goal of independence, which is the most important thing for all pro-independence voters to be thinking about. In order to get enough of a parliamentary majority in Holyrood to achieve what Alex Salmond, is the only person who did this incidentally, did in 2011, when the SNP got an overall majority, something which was meant to be impossible under the bizarre British dehont voting system that was introduced to prevent it. Salmond basically broke the system and achieved basically an outright majority of SNP MSPs at Holyrood, the one and only time it's ever been done. Now that shows how a charismatic figure like Salmond was capable of taking the public along with him and ensuring that the SNP won as many of these second list seats as possible, so that they were not only in government, but they could actually carry out whatever policies they wished in that parliament and know that the opposition was not large enough to stop them. And if we want to hold an independence referendum after the 2026 elections, which I'm sure we all would like to do, we can't do that if the SNP has engineered another minority government with unionists in opposition and being unable, because they don't have an outright majority, to actually hold this referendum under the terms of the United Nations Charter, which guarantees our right to self-determination. Now, you know, and I've mentioned this many times, that Salvo is currently putting the case together to take to the International Court of Justice and the United Nations to prove that Scotland still has the right to self-determination, that it was not in any way given up in 1707, and it certainly still remains even after the highly questionable result of the 2014 referendum. So there is always the right to self-determination, and Salva is going to ensure that that right is enshrined in an international legal ruling. Now, if that is done, and I anticipate it will be successful, then in 2026, whoever is the largest, or whoever has the majority in Holyrood in 2026, can then hold a referendum on independence, set the franchise, decide how it's run, where it's counted, how it's counted, and all the other things to do with that referendum can be decided in our parliament because the government has an overall majority. But if, as looks likely at the moment from this poll, we continue down this ridiculous path where we continuously ignore the way the voting system has been stacked to ensure we lose the second seats, then we're not going to get that overall majority at all. And if we do not get that overall majority, then none of these things may happen because they simply can't. The arithmetic doesn't lie. The numbers are not there. So one of the things that myself and many other people online who blog about this and who put out regular content is that we need a stronger medium, a stronger media, which includes people like myself, people like the Scotland Channel, people like Phantom Power, people like Grousebeater, all of those individuals who currently put out pro-independence content and news like this need to be included in one big social media package, a channel which carries only that messaging, that positive messaging about Scotland's case for independence, not the negativity which is enshrined in the BBC's charter, in which Britishness rules. So we're working at the moment to put together an organisation of all of the social media producers at the moment so that we can help to educate the voters, to explain to them why SNP 1 and 2 will not result in independence, but will only result in an SNP devolutionist minority government, and could only ever do that simply because we are simply walking into the trap laid for us by the Labour Party back in 1997, when they designed this voting system to basically kill stone dead any chance for independence to happen. Because that's what this voting system is for. It's not to elect our MSPs, it's to prevent us from electing enough pro-independence MSPs to actually leave the Union. So we are going to try our best, and I hope with the help of my colleagues in various other channels, to put together regular content on a single channel which everybody can watch as an alternative to the dreadful BBC and ITV stuff, which is currently trying to, even now, to stain the reputation of the recently passed law on Alex Salmond. So we need an alternative media in order for us to educate people about this voting system, and so that we can actually see the polls changing, so that this SNP 1 and 2 choice, which seems to be the majority in favour of at the moment, of 58% of people, voters have said this is the way they plan to vote, we need to reduce that a lot, and we need to see the other parties of independence. Alba, certainly. The ISP, certainly. Scottish Socialist Party, yes. And all the other independent candidates. Now, these are people who stand on the platform of independence but are not affiliated with a political party. Those people need our support. So as this develops, several other things will need to happen. If we can get the polls to budge and move the other way so that people stop voting SNP 1 and 2 in the next general election in 2026, then the parties involved, and I'm talking mainly here about the SNP, would need to look at that and decide whether they want to continue pursuing a route which is inevitably going to cause them to lose seats and lose support, or whether they want to listen to the people whose opinions have changed and who have realised that the voting system is working against their aspirations for independence, and now are insisting that the SNP works together with the other parties of independence to produce an alliance which can win a complete majority at Holyrood, something which I think is the real legacy that Alex Salmond has left behind. If he could achieve that by himself back in 2011, then it should be pretty easy with the mass ranks of all the parties of independence that we currently have to simply talk to each other, form an alliance, and do exactly the same thing. But it will only happen if we start moving people's opinions and moving people's voting choices, their intentions, in a way which looks like the SNP's plan is not working, because I don't think they're going to listen unless the people start voting with their feet and saying we're not going to vote SNP 1 and 2, we're going to vote SNP 1 and Alba 2 or SNP 1 and ISP 2, whatever that is. But until people start to say that in polls, it's very difficult to get politicians to change their minds. I'm going to do my damnedest to try and change everybody's minds so that we realise that, yes, we can vote SNP in the first vote. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's saying we shouldn't. But the SNP has to realise that there are other team players here who want to help and who are prepared just to forget about all their past indiscretions or arguments with other parties or disputes about certain people and their activities. All of that should be forgotten. The one thing that has always succeeded in bringing Scots together is the threat of invasion. The trouble is we've already been invaded and we have already been assimilated into the Union. And what's hardest to do is to shock people out of their, I would say, defeatist attitude. Oh, we can't do anything about it. We might as well just try and get an SNP minority government. This is not good enough. It's far, far short of what's needed to actually sort things out. The United Kingdom has made, and particularly the Labour government, has made all kinds of policy decisions which are going to sequestrate huge areas of Scottish industry, which will no longer be under the control of either the Scottish Government, the local authorities, or even the British Government. These will be given to international corporations, and they will be able to do what they like with their workforces, with their taxation, with the law and order, with the repairs and the maintenance, the infrastructure, and everything in those so-called special economic zones or free ports. That is Labour policy. The other Labour policy is this ridiculous GB Energy paper tiger, which is going to produce a paper company, basically a shell corporation, which will have to buy energy from existing generators. We're going to charge them the same extortionate fees, and GB Energy is going to be forced to sell that stuff in the open market, competing against dozens of other providers. So GB Energy is going to do nothing to lower your energy bills. It's going to make it worse. It's going to end up with a tiny, non-privatised corporation trying to operate in a privatised market. That's not the same thing as taking back control of energy prices. To do that, you would need to get the regulator to lower the energy price cap to a level that people can afford. Not going to happen. So with all of this going on, and Keir Starmer now deciding that he's going to give over control of the United Kingdom's industry to foreign investment, which he's just announced, we lose control of even more of our production, even more of our workforce, and even more of our territory as the great fire sale of British assets begins. And if you don't want that to happen, if you don't want Scotland to be sold to private enterprise, as the Labour Party is currently proposing to do, you need to change your voting habits. And you need to stop voting SNP 1 and 2 and vote SNP 1 and somebody else in the second vote. Because if you don't do that, you will never get the majority in Holyrood, and you will not be able because you won't have the arithmetical numbers of a majority to actually hold that referendum, even if, as I expect, Salvo establishes the international legality of having that referendum. There is a lot to unpack in this. And it's tempting just to go for the simplistic answer of, yeah, I'll just vote SNP 1 and 2 like I always do, because that's always the way I've voted in the past and it's always been okay. It's not okay. It just leads us down the rabbit hole even further and into the clutches of the privatised United Kingdom, which is the way we're currently heading. So if you don't want any of that to happen, then watch out for changes in social media, because I think there is going to be a consolidation of channels such as this with many others, and we aim, at least in principle, to produce a channel which is regular content from myself, perhaps from Grace Peter, perhaps from Peter Bell, who knows, from other writers, other broadcasters, Phantom Power, for example. Scotland Channel is certainly there as the foundation for this, and I'm hoping that they will become involved as well. At the moment, these are just tentative notions, and there are various moves to reach out to these organisations and these producers to try and bring this together so that we can compete and give a message which is true to the people of Scotland, not to vote SNP 1 and 2 ever again, because that way lies continued colonisation. We can't get out of the colony if we keep voting this way. We need to learn. We need to be prepared to take a bit of a punt. And this is why Salmond was so successful. He could create an opportunity for himself, and then he had the wit and the courage to actually use it to Scotland's advantage. And that is how the 2014 referendum happened, because he created the opportunity for it and was prepared to bet everything on its success. We need to do the same. That is the legacy. But to do it, we need an overall majority in Holyrood so that nobody can say that we did not vote for this. Anyway, sorry, enough of a rant. I hope you've enjoyed the content of today's programme. As usual, if you want to help Inde-Car, you can always do so by following some of the links. Some of the other channels which carry my content, we'll put a link up which is active and you can use to donate. And thank you, incidentally, to several people who made massive donations recently and have helped me to keep going. That's it from Inde-Car today. But remember to keep the faith, but also remember that some of us need to change our voting habits, and some of us need to persuade other people to change their voting habits, because only when we work as a country can we actually make ourselves free. We can't make ourselves free if we're fighting amongst ourselves, and that is what the British state depends on to keep us chained up and to keep robbing us of our resources while we stand fretting and clutching our pearls and whining about it. It's time to stop whining. It's time to stop fighting amongst ourselves, and for the parties to reach out to each other and say, let's time for an alliance. Let's take over our own parliament with a massive majority and actually give the people a chance to vote on this for the second time, but this time without the British bias, without the British vote counting down in England, without people breaking purdah rules, and so on and so on. So I hope you've enjoyed the programme, and you'll join me again when I make another one. At the moment I'm trying to make about 3 to 4 editions a week. It's a little bit tricky at the moment. I have a very chaotic work schedule all the time, but I'll try to make a programme every other day if I can. So that's it from Inde-Car. Remember, keep the faith, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.